Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Brad Musil, and welcome to the Philosopher's Couch, where I sit down and discuss philosophical issues with average everyday people, people who aren't in, haven't made philosophy their career. And so I am honored to have for the first episode Jamie Kramer here with us. So welcome, Jamie.
Thank you.
Yes. This is the first episode. I have a pretty good game plan, but we'll see how it goes. Jamie, I haven't told Jamie too much about the specifics of what's going to go on here. He has a rough general kind of idea that we're going to talk some philosophy. Going to ask him how he knows me and so on. Ask him what has a particular interest philosophically to him. But beyond that, I didn't really specify too much, did I?
No,
Okay.
not really.
So, Jamie, you are not pursuing philosophy, correct? Do you have any philosophy degrees?
No.
Okay, so you are an average, everyday Joe Blow, so to speak, right? You
Yeah.
have no philosophical degrees. Okay, so who are you? Where are you from? How do we know each other?
I'm a human.
Good. That's a good start.
My name is Jamie, of course, and who am I is hard to answer.
That's already a
so-
very deep philosophical question, right?
Okay.
So, where are you from? How do we know each other? And
I'm
how
from
long have we
a
known each
small
other?
town in Nebraska, where I grew up. We know each other through college, living in the same dorm
How long has it
and
been?
since 1999.
A long time.
Yeah.
Over 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, really long time.
so he's used to my philosophical nature, I guess, and we've had many philosophical discussions over the decades. uh, Anything else you want to add there? So you said
Well,
small town. Go ahead.
sure. So yeah, small town and um, college and
University of
um,
Nebraska, Kearney. So I'm from Kearney, pretty small town as well, I would say, but nothing compared to Stewart, right? What's that?
uh, population 650
650.
and class of 20
Class of
in my
20.
graduating
I think
class.
we had 400-ish in mine. So town of 30,000 for Kearney.
So I was valedictorian.
Okay, very nice. Out
Yes,
of how many?
class of 20. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
So you're
that's a
pretty
little bit
smart.
about me.
Pretty smart. What would you say are some interests and what do you do? I think that's actually that's terrible. I hate that question, right? What do you do?
Mm,
But it's like one of those conversation starters. But I think it's important here because one of the things I'm going to do a little bit later is ask a couple questions that are kind of related to you particularly. And one of them has to kind of do with what you do. So, what do you do? Do you have any, would you say, what are your general interests? And I should say, where are we? So we have some common
mm.
interests here. We are in Colorado. So this is not going to be the traditional philosopher's couch. I should have started with that, right? This is a place we rented in Breckenridge, Colorado. So we've climbed a few 14,000 feet mountains. Our feet are killing us. Came out here to unwind, get away from civilization for a while, talk some philosophy on these long, long hikes. So obviously you have some interests, some that overlap with me, and so yeah. What do you do? Any
Okay,
interests? So on.
sure. So what I do, I work with all things computer technology related, especially related to cloud and e-learning platforms. So
So,
I'm a solutions architect for the full official title.
title, nice.
So if you're asking what I do in terms of career, it's where I'm at right now.
What's your like sort of average everyday existence like? Would you say in terms of work? You have a lot of flexibility, right? You kind of
Yeah, a fair amount of flexibility and a lot of change right now. Um, there's always problems to solve and
right.
things to build and fires to put out. So
Did you get tired over the years of anything computer related, me contacting you, and probably everyone else that's a good friend contacting you? It gets a little old, doesn't it?
it's
Nah.
okay. I
Okay.
mean, it's been a lot, but
You have to be
it's
truthful too. This is a philosophy
sometimes
series.
it's fun, but um, sometimes I
It's
just
been
don't
very
know
helpful.
either.
I know. Yeah, yeah, sure. Okay, so we know each other. again, going back to University of Nebraska at Kearney, I had a bachelor's degree in psychology and philosophy. I mean, were computers from the get-go, right? As well. Or did you switch your major at all?
That was computer science was what I set out and finished with. Yeah.
Okay. And so after you graduated, you came down, you worked and family came down a little bit in Kansas City, right?
That's right.
We were down there, and then you
Yep.
moved back up to good old Kearney, Nebraska, where I was born and where we met, right? University of
That's
Nebraska,
right.
Kearney. So, okay, so that's kind of an intro, if you will. So I wanted to discuss a little bit. Obviously, we established from the get-go that you have no philosophy degrees. How philosophical would you consider yourself? Well, let's start. Let me back up. What would you consider, in your view, what is philosophy? What is philosophy? And take your time
I
here.
just usually it comes back to the simplified kind of visualization of a big blank sign on your door, except for the letters Y in big bold print with question marks. So I sort of
I
think it's
recall
kind of like that.
putting papers like that up on our
Um,
walls when we were roommates
so
various
since
times.
yeah,
Big question marks and
so I think that philosophy, I guess, if from my perspective, I mean, you've introduced me to a lot of concepts or questions, and so
so were
it's
you
just
saying?
like kind of questioning things
Okay,
or
right.
using logic to solve problems or make conclusions about
I was going
things.
to say initially you were kind of getting at that you associated with the questions and the questioning things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So yeah, I think that's kind of probably a general connotation for it, right? Especially the big questions, right? The deep stuff, so to speak. So I think have some common ground there. And then how philosophical then would you say you are? And maybe an even better way to frame it would be before and after you met me. Having that influence of
oh yeah.
because we were around each other, especially in some pretty formidable years. Undergrad.
So here's the way it is. Like I think that I had these questions that were maybe suppressed or just not really allowed to be expressed or didn't know how or did never know anybody who knew how maybe.
And I mean, a lot of that's
So
probably
when I met
small
you,
town,
well,
maybe.
sure, and just general experience, but then meeting you, and I don't know what was the.
You got more philosophical, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, I did. So I felt like kind
Or
of
those suppressed questions,
you
then
allowed that stuff
I
to
drug them out.
and like really enjoy talking about them actually, just
Would you say
casually or whatever.
that's always been the case? You do enjoy
I
discussing philosophy?
I mean, at first it irritated me a little bit
I feel
about
like,
you.
oh,
Uh,
okay. Yeah, I was gonna say
sure. I
because I
mean,
feel a lot of times
yeah,
when I have philosophical conversations or I'm inclined to say stuff or talk philosophy,
right.
a lot of people don't want to, and so I mean
Hmm.
that's kind of an issue, like finding people that even enjoy that. So yeah, I was curious. So initially you were a bit annoyed, but then it kind of you warmed up to I don't know
Hmm.
questioning
For
things, so to
sure.
speak.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I would say I do enjoy just having those discussions.
And have your I guess another interesting question would be, would you say that your philosophical views have changed over the years, and if so, like how considerably, like significantly, or I feel like in terms of a lot of people we know in particular, it seems like when they got to college, a lot of their views might have changed, or in some cases they became even more solidified, I guess. But it was kind of a period where you really sort of flesh things out. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
for me, that was the case, and it seemed like that was the case for talking to a lot of people we know that was the case for them. So, I guess would you say that how was your sort of philosophical development? Did your overall views change a lot? And I guess mine, in some sense, maybe didn't necessarily change a lot. A lot of
Hmm.
my views haven't changed since say like high school.
Hmm.
So I guess yeah, what would you say? Have you changed a lot in your philosophical views over the years? And if so, when in particular?
Hmm. Well, probably because maybe some things I never really thought about
Okay, like you
at
said,
first.
didn't necessarily question them at first.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't even know if I could think of A lot of examples, but
Like, I
sure,
mean,
sure. So the answer, yeah. I would say things maybe I've changed, and it started in college mostly, and then
were you very
that
philosophical in high
it
school?
didn't really like stop there, so
Did you, granted, you were suggesting like you didn't know people necessarily that you had conversations with
right.
before college, but was it something that you would think about much? Nonetheless, like, privately, would you have, think about some of these deep issues?
Yes, I think so, but I'm just not really even having a framework for thinking through it
Right. You
really
only have that
well.
limited experience, especially
Right.
back then at that
Yeah.
that
So
young age.
even being able to even wonder or ask the right questions
Right. You think you're
first.
being reflective, but
Yeah.
at that age in particular, how do you even know that you're really,
Yeah.
you know, um,
Yeah. And it can be scary at times too,
that's a
at the
good point.
younger ages and things.
Yeah, because you're, especially when you're brought up certain ways, right? And you might not
Hmm.
necessarily be as inclined to endorse those views of mom and dad. I
Yeah.
think that happens for a lot of us.
Yeah.
It happened to me for politics for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm.
My parents weren't necessarily, they didn't, I don't know the right word, but religion wasn't, a huge fixture in our house. But my dad was very, very political, and so I just remember definitely early on having a lot of, philosophical reflections on, especially the things that they would talk about more. So for in
Hmm.
my case, politics. But
Sure.
okay, so we've established what you think of philosophy, sort of how philosophical you are. Here's a fun one. Who is your favorite philosopher of all time? Do you even have one? Actually, for some, I might have to say, can you even name one? Uh, I mean, that's probably a fair question for some of us out there, right?
Sure. Sure.
So, do you have a favorite philosopher?
I
Not
mean,
really.
I'm not well read enough to say
Who
to
have you
say
read? Now,
that.
you
So,
had we took one or two way back in the day. We had a couple classes together, didn't we? Didn't you take?
Intro to Ethics,
Okay, was that your
right?
only one?
I think so.
Okay. So you took that. Do you remember anybody that you read 20 years ago in that class? Now, if I recall,
Okay.
did we read Dostoevsky, Brothers Karamazov? Did you take that ethics class?
Yeah, but I thought that was in a
Or a
different
different
class.
course? Okay,
But okay. But yes, I remember
so
reading
you
that for
read
a class.
Dostoevsky, which is more known as a novelist, but very philosophical book. And the reason why I mentioned that is because I thought the ethics instructor that he was a huge fan of that book, the one I thought we took together. So you took
Okay.
ethics. Do you remember any other philosophers? Not really. Okay.
I mean,
Can you name any philosophers?
so there's the Socratic
Oh,
method, right?
okay. So
So
who?
Socrates.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So we got one. That who?
Aristotle.
Okay. Can you name the one in
Uh,
between them? That's good. I always say in my intro classes, like lecture one, going through this stuff that the ones that everyone know are these.
Plato.
There you go. Are the most,
Yeah.
some of the oldest, and it's always Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So you
Okay.
nailed the big three,
Good. Good.
three from the ancient era.
Past that.
Okay, so last philosophical background question: are there any particular questions or areas of philosophy that you would say? So you said you've grown to kind of appreciate talking philosophy over the years.
Hmm.
Are there any particular areas? Now we've talked on the way here that sometimes maybe don't talk political philosophy because that can cause issues, and I totally agree with that. But are there any particular areas that are you find particularly intriguing? Uh, why are we here? That sort of thing, or what's really going on? We talked about on one of our hikes, and we'll get into this a little bit more. Is this a simulation? Neil
Right.
deGrasse
Right.
Tyson suggesting that there's more than a 50%
Yeah.
chance.
I mean, I think
How do
all
we
that
know that?
stuff is really interesting to
Okay, so
think
you would
about.
say,
So
and it's
just
kind of related
getting
to
really to the
tech,
core of
computers,
questioning what is
what's actually
happening, like you
happening.
just said. So,
Okay, so in technical philosophical jargon, we'd say, I guess, metaphysics. What's real, what's actually happening. Uh, is everything, physical? Is everything just perception? We kind of had that discussion too.
hmm.
How can we be sure that there's anything outside of our perceptions when everything we've ever experienced has come down to our perceptions, right? So what is really happening? It sounds like that's metaphysics, that you're particularly into metaphysics. So the next section or segment that I'd like to do is discuss what I refer to as the big questions. So this will be a segment that will be consistent. Actually, all three of these first three will be consistent throughout all the episodes. So I'll ask the same 5 big questions for everyone. So we'll hear what you have to say about these. Are you ready?
Okay.
So this is kind of, well, actually not this one. So this is, I put this first because really this is the one that got me started in philosophy. I remember having just always thinking about this from as far back as I can remember, and that is, why is there something and not nothing? So what would you say to that? Why is there something and not nothing? And of course, this gets into a lot of what we talked about. Was that yesterday on yesterday's side?
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know, and that's fine.
Okay.
That's kind of, I don't. If you're asking me.
So we would say, or what I suggested would be sort of agnosticism with respect to that. And so you're not going a deity or a divine creation route. You're not going to commit yourself to everything's just been here forever. And I made some interesting comments on that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, these are really great things to think about because they just get my wheels turning, and never really ending up anywhere when I think about it. But
do you find that frustrating? Because I think
I don't know. It's kind of part of the fun of it, maybe.
But there's not anything necessarily definitive that that it's.
And I guess accepting that.
And is that something that you? I think that's interesting too. At what point did you feel like you kind of came to terms with this idea that you'll maybe never figure it out? I mean, for me, for a long time,
it's been years in the making.
Okay, so this has been where you've been for a while.
Well, I mean, it's been just kind of growing and
getting more and more towards that sort of position.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so why is there something and not nothing? Your answer is, I don't know. Is that what I got from it?
Yes.
Okay, let me get that down here. I don't know. Okay, we're gonna see if we get anything besides that on any of these.
Okay. Oh well,
go ahead.
I did make the point that that I've heard people say, so this is just repeating it. But I like it because there's no example of nothing to kind of base that on. So I don't know. It just is really interesting to me.
Well, elaborate on that a little bit. So what is the implication? We have no. How can we even get started because we don't even have any concept of nothing? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I've heard sort of that spiel. We got into. I kind of got into my thing with I don't believe in particular God, or I'm not religious in the traditional sense. But then over the years I've also, and this is the argument I suggest to you, the people on the other side who suggest, well, stuff just always happened. To me, I've found that equally problematic because we don't accept, right? It's sort of suggesting we don't need a cause for all this stuff. But the people that suggest that don't apply that in every other realm of their life, right? Every other way we think of things always involves us, right, suggesting or thinking of there being a cause for everything. Yet we don't apply that to that, right? Or some people don't. So
I just still don't know how then you can't apply
how do you get into
to the God, because I've never been able to get past that whole.
So we're right. I mean, they're both, and I've done a whole episode on this, right?
Sure.
Right? They both routes are problematic. Hence, maybe the right answer is I don't know. I mean, they both do seem some sort of problematic, and you create. I mean, the classic issue, and my kids even say this, right? If you suggest a deity or a divine creation, well, then what caused that, or why did God exist? And why draw the line there, and why not just keep applying that? Fair enough. So I don't know with that. Question 2: what's the meaning of life, or why are we here? Kind of two different questions that get at the same thing. So what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? Are we going to get something besides I don't know?
What is the meaning of life?
42. That's
So it's
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
right, yeah, yeah.
What do you
I don't
got?
necessarily know the answer, but I think the meaning
I
of life
don't know.
is a lot of what we make of it, and
So it's kind of
all.
down to the individual.
Yeah, I suppose so.
And
I
so
mean,
I
people
might,
put importance and interest in different things, and that's their meaning for whatever. So,
well, I brought Camus up earlier today. I can't remember why, and the absurdity of things. Oh, we were watching Naked Lunch, William S. Burroughs, and this sort of idea that everything is ultimately absurd, and this idea that there is no meaning to life, right? But I don't know. How do we know that either, right? So
and come back to kind of questioning the question as well. Like, is that a good question? Um,
it's one of the main philosophical questions.
or
I mean, it's the nature of philosophy, right? If you're looking for concrete answers, then no, it's not a good question. So are we going with I don't know?
no, I mean, there's a lot of meaning we all make
What
out
would
of
you
it.
say then? So fair
There's
enough. It comes down to
family,
the individual.
fulfillment, and generally seeking
Happiness.
happiness and well-being and love and good things and enjoyment and
So I guess a general,
avoiding pain.
so a general descriptor might be just the pursuit of happiness, whatever that means for you. Being content, avoiding pain
I
in some
mean,
sense.
setting goals or achieving certain
That's
things,
important.
or at some point being content with where you're at or what you're doing, or
Fair enough.
uh, what is the
They're tough,
mean?
aren't they?
What is? I don't believe in an ultimate meaning of
That applies objectively to
gut.
everyone. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
I'd be. There's
That's
too
fair.
many individuals.
That all think differently in terms of these
Right.
questions, right? Okay, questions. The third one in terms of the big questions: does morality exist, and how do we figure it out if it does? So,
Yeah.
is there another
Yeah,
way?
it exists.
Okay, so we have this is our first like affirmative, like confident, definitive yes or
Yeah.
a
So you
position.
might have to help me through it a little bit.
Okay, so I mean, another way to think about red is well, we all know what morality is. Just there's a proper way to behave.
Right.
Okay, and so then naturally, and of course, spend whole courses trying to flesh this out. But how do you figure it out then? So you owe
So,
me an explanation,
okay. I
so
mean,
to speak.
I'm influenced by YouTubers and whatnot,
The
of course.
influencers.
So,
A common response I'll get, right? I like to when I start my ethics courses, I'll pull the classes, and a common one will be like, I mean, sort of like you're saying these influences, but like the family and immediate environment that is a common one that is cited in terms of where people suggest they get their um, sort of moral theory. But then that seems problematic to me in a little bit. And I'm not saying that you are necessarily suggesting morality is grounded in that, but when we all have different sort of experiences growing up and parents telling us different things in terms of what's right and wrong, like how does that work to ground morality then?
yeah.
Again, not that you were saying that
So
necessarily.
I mean, if it for many people, it just might start with their religious upbringing
That's
or
another
whatever,
very common
and
response.
then so there's kind of that
I think that's a
morality
huge
or
one for
set
a lot of
values,
people.
but some things from that apply probably to a lot of moral codes or systems.
Right.
So
Would you say religion has influenced your moral compass, so to speak, over the years? Or at least did it in terms of your sort of beginning? I mean, I know you personally, obviously, so I know it's maybe become less of an influence over the years, but since we talked about the tie between religion and morality, I still have vivid memories of my dad, who's not very religious, having discussions with him actually on a trip I think out to Colorado once, how he was trying to convince me that nonetheless religion was necessary for morality. So, regardless of how maybe religious you actually are, what would you say? Would you say that religion influenced your sense of morality then?
I would say yeah at first, but the thing that I guess made the most sense to me that I've heard is just you can start with I don't know, the moral code based on what causes least harm or
Okay.
most, I don't know. It,
Start with that, and
yeah.
or at the very least, don't harm others.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, as kind of a baseline or a starting point, because it seems
I think,
reasonable, and I suppose it goes deeper than
and
that.
even, I mean, what's interesting about that as a starting spot is that, even if you want to sort of base morality on self-interest, like someone like Hobbes, I mean, it's still in your interest then to not be harming others, right? And for a lot
Hmm.
of people, that would be kind of a skeptical view of traditional morality. You're not really buying into this idea that there's a right way to behave. You're just saying that we have to for the sake of self-interest, but at least it's still common ground, right? There, all these seemingly disparate theories are can find some common ground in this idea that
Yeah, and
don't harm others,
I'm not so sure it's not just part of our social,
that it's ingrained in us.
a bit maybe.
Well, I was going to say earlier that, speaking of this religion and morality, what's interesting to me is that all these different religions nonetheless proffer the same sort of moral standards in some sense, right? The
Hmm.
same underlying principles in many respects. So, again, that kind of speaks to your idea that maybe it's something within our species, I guess, that's what would be the real word? It's sort of a group, I don't know,
Yeah,
feature.
I mean, because yeah, it can be selfish, but also good for the group or
Right.
whatever.
Whether we call that ultimately moral in the traditional sense or not, yeah. Yeah, we can find some, I think, common ground in this idea. Don't harm others.
And not
Um,
necessarily just others, but life forms
oh, that's a
or
good point too.
you
Yeah,
know,
I've come to appreciate that a lot more as I've gotten older. I think a lot that's true of a lot of people coming out in nature in Colorado and
mhm,
the whole hiker etiquette and take everything back that you brought up on your
mhm.
hikes and yeah, that's a good point. Growing to appreciate not just other human beings but other living creatures. So
Mhm. Yes.
nice. So we have a definitive position on the big question number three: does morality exist, and how do we figure it out?
Felt pressured to have a firm position.
No, no, that's my fault. I kind of did pressure you. So,
No, no.
so we had
You
yes,
have to.
and sort of how do we figure out? You did. I mean, you're basically saying let's find some common ground, and, regardless of what we want to call our theory, in this idea of don't harm others. Just start with that, and then maybe come up with some other moral principles along the way. But I think that's a good starting point too. This is a good one. I know that we've talked about this quite a bit over the years. So, big question number four, second to last one: are we ultimately free, or are we determined? And again, we got into this a little bit on our hike yesterday. So, what would you say to that? Hey,
Oh, I've just been all over the place on this.
let me preface this too, because to avoid an I don't know, and I should have said this to begin with, because to be honest, I'm with you on most of that, right? Where I'm pretty agnostic in terms of most of these myself. So, granted that, and so you might come out and say I'm agnostic. I don't ultimately know, but where would you say you lean if you had to sort of place your bet on one side or the other?
Yeah, so what were the kind of two?
Free, ultimately free, or we're determined, right? That
I think from from what I understand, it seems like it's mostly determined, but maybe it feels free.
well, I'm curious to get your take on this too, with your computer background, right? With input response. Are we just complicated machines, computers, right, that are programmed in certain ways, and we're just not conscious of all the variables? We think we have this, freedom, and we're dictating things. But like David Hume said, we went over this in the hike, right? We think hey, I'm free, I'm raising my left arm, but meanwhile, all these various processes you have no
Yes,
idea
in
about.
everything that has ever happened to you in your life or experience, from your first days all through childhood, yes, all of these variables, they've affected you and sort of shaped you into something, right? All of these factors that are out of your control, going back for the beginning of time.
Right. I think.
So that feels like it's kind of out of our control how things
Okay.
are working out, but you can't kind of ignore how it feels like we have a lot of choice in
Well, I
some
was going to say
ways.
what's interesting is a lot of people would say, right, if you're going to sort of lean towards, well, we don't have a choice and we're determined, then can you hold people morally accountable, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
an issue for them.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who wants to advocate this idea that there is such a thing as morality. No, I don't necessarily know that that's an issue per se, but right, because we don't want to hold someone accountable for something they had no choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they had no choice in the matter, right,
Something that
you
I've
can't blame them, so to
right,
speak.
not blame them. And so I've heard some people say like, so maybe it should be treated different with regards to, how punishment or um,
Fair enough.
justice system works. Maybe it should be a little more compassionate, but yet try to shape this person into somebody who won't do that again or
Right.
improve in
So
some way.
make it more rehabilitative instead of what is it, punitive?
Yeah,
Instead of emphasizing the
exactly,
punishment,
exactly.
maybe more compassion.
Hmm.
That's good. Yeah. So
Compassion.
going back to going back to ultimately free or determined, you're then leaning towards being determined.
Oh, I just never thought I would lean towards
Right.
that, but it just feels like that's where my leaning has been over the last 2 years now, because this is something I've kind of read people's opinions and debates about
Nice.
many times. I've listened to a lot of philosophy debates on YouTube.
Regardless if we're ultimately determined, I do kind of get frustrated going back to what your general point about how we have all these factors that influence us, and I think so many of us lose sight over time, just with respect to how much that's true, right? And we don't realize, right, how much we think we're coming to our positions of our own accord, but how much of that was a byproduct of hearing your dad speak a certain way over and over and over, right, throughout
Yeah.
the years. So.
Right.
Um,
And then you learn that, they're a certain way because of the influences they had.
Maybe you don't blame them quite as much, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Yeah, interesting.
we're not special. It's kind of happening to all of us.
Fair enough. Last one. What is really happening? So this gets back to what we were talking about, right? Is this a simulation, a bunch of physical stuff, and that's it? A test for some afterlife? So what is really happening? You said that this is one of the things that really interests you, this metaphysical sort of stuff, right? Is this actually just a simulation? By the way, we had this discussion. Do you think it's simulation? I guess this is what gets to your answer to this, right? How would we
Oh,
know, right? How do we know that? So go ahead.
is it a simulation?
Or what's happening in general? Is it a
What's
simulation? Is it a test?
Probably not, but I feels like it just really could be at the same time. Consciousness uh, feels too complex for it to be sort of simulated like this, but how would I
Interesting.
know, right?
Well, yeah. Can you conceive of a way we could tell whether it's a simulation or not? I mean, because you're kind of more techie, more computerish guy, right, than me.
Right.
This has always troubled me. I mean, how would we, when Neil deGrasse Tyson comes out and says he thinks there's a better than a 50% chance? Don't quote me on that. I'm 90% sure that's the case. How
Yeah.
does he know that? Like, on what is he looking at? What are these people who are suggesting this looking at? Even remember one
Right.
time a student saying that some scientists had an exact percentage that they had calculated, like a 1.7432% chance of simulation. How can you conceive of a way we would figure that out?
No,
Uh, Granted, it's a
not
possibility.
right. I mean, I was talking about too some of the sci-fi series or concepts or some of these just sort of sci-fi fiction.
It's
The
interesting because it
AI just
explores
gets
these.
you thinking about it, and yeah, how could you tell? I don't know. And but sometimes things don't add up,
Right, it
or
seems like
we talk
something
about like something's going on here.
something weird is
So,
yeah. We all have kind of I
but
don't
it
know.
appears that yeah, we're people and animals and planets and a universe, and
So
a
on the
lot
other
of
hand,
physical stuff
just
seems obvious.
like the generally scientific interpretation, that seems sort of appealing too. You're saying just
Hmm.
that there's physical stuff going on, and just like it seems. When we are, I say just like it seems.
Yeah,
When we die, that's it, or
and
something
there's
like
no
that.
reason in a simulation that science couldn't explain things
But it
to a
still
degree
doesn't
that it
apply,
applies
right?
to, you know, practical usage in
Within
the
the framework, right?
simulation.
Within the simulation, it
Right,
still works, so to
right.
speak.
So I'm not saying that it is, but
Okay. What would you be your general response to what's really happening? Is it? I have a prediction. I don't know.
oh yeah, okay.
Is that it?
Well, ultimately, yes. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. What would you lean towards?
I guess I would have to lean towards it is what it is. It is a bunch
Meaning,
of
I said something similar to
physical
that.
stuff and
Okay,
things
the scientific
interacting, and
interpretation,
there are laws of this and that that
not a
govern
simu.
everything.
Well, actually, a scientific
And I
interpretation
have
is simulation, right? I mean, scientists are telling us
what?
that it is a simulation.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, because I think what you're alluding to is maybe not the simulation. It's just like this physical stuff. When we die, we die. That's it. We're not going to
Hmm.
wake up in some other reality from the
Yeah.
simulation.
Well, that doesn't seem likely to me,
Okay.
but
But yeah, the scientists are telling us both of these are possible,
oh,
right? Neil deGrasse Tyson, it's 50% greater than 50% chance that it is a simulation. But like you said, maybe still all the scientific principles and whatnot, right? It still applies. Um, so you're leaning towards what you were describing as scientific,
yeah, and
physical.
and then humans with complex emotional and complex brains and social interactions. It just, I don't know. You add that to this mix of what is going on, and
Things get real interesting, right?
yeah,
Well, that did we talk
we're
about that too?
perceiving.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, because I always find fascinating, we talked about how, us versus like machines on the one hand, and we got into like, can computers take over and AI take over? But then there's also like juxtaposing us with other animals too, and like how similar are we with them as well? I mean, this is a tangent, but do you
Mhm.
have any sort of thoughts on that? Would you say that we're more like other animals than most people think, and there's not something particularly special about us? Or do you think of humans as being sort of, unique or significantly different than other animals? Granted, we have a
I,
lot of the same biological processes and so on.
yeah, I feel like maybe there's a special quality of higher intelligence with humans that we can acknowledge, but I don't necessarily think that that's not a reason that makes us more
Special,
special than other animals on
more
this
worthy of
planet.
certain
Yeah,
rights and so
I
on.
mean, we happen to, get where we are through generations of, you know, parents and grandparents going back for so long. Uh,
So we're somewhere in between. We're similar but distinct to other animals.
yeah,
And you were suggesting on our walk, very similar to AI. What we think of AI too, right? So I don't know. Are we
yeah, because we were talking about it does seem like we're just not just, but biological machines.
sort of,
So we are like animals physically. I mean, that's just
and
true.
then running sort of a complex program then, or
Yeah,
okay,
uh,
that we're not always fully aware of, or even
yeah,
partially aware of?
and not even always under our control. Because I'm fascinated that you may have thoughts come up that you didn't really generate. Like once that was pointed
Where
out,
does it
like that's
come
sometimes
from?
true, and sometimes it seems like you kind of manifest your own thoughts, but other times they just might come
That's
up, right?
yeah. I haven't thought about that in a
And
while. Like,
then
where do they from the abyss? Where do they come from? Just
yeah,
no control
so
over that, right?
yeah, and that's really interesting.
Well, yeah. What is
Um,
spawning all these?
and then what do you do with that kind of thought or whatever it may be?
And whatever you think you're controlling, I mean, that's still a byproduct of whatever spawned that initially, right?
Right.
Hmm. Interesting. So I think we had what's really happening, leaning towards, I guess, what I would call maybe a naturalist sort of response. It's just like our traditional natural interpretation. Everything is sort of physical. Um, I mean, again, you don't know. I don't know.
Right.
Agnostic if pressed, but if you had to place a bet,
I have that. If I have to, it would be based on my senses and my sensory input and what I've, I guess, learned through experience or whatever, and then it just stuff stuff is happening.
That we can agree on. At the very least, something is happening. Now, whether that's outside my mind as well, that's where it gets really interesting, right? But something is happening.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
say that because, at least my interpretation of David Hume, that's literally the only thing he suggests we can be certain of, is that we're having an impression there is something happening. Everything else is, in some sense, imagined, right? This notion of external world. I have videos on that. So, anyway, let's move on. I have the next segment is the guest related. I have a couple questions based on my guest, right? So philosophical questions, sort of based on who you are, what you do, and so on. I alluded to that earlier. So the first one would be, do you have any thoughts on the intersection of technology and happiness? This is my main interest lately. I've referenced this in some videos. So I've talked to you about like the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, and his idea that technology is enslaving us, that it's restricting our freedom, unbeknownst to us most of the time, right? So he thinks it's terrible, that it's obviously not optimal for happiness and so on. So I've had a lot to think about that. I mean, that's been of huge interest to me. Curious, again, given your involvement with computers and so much technology, you've always been so much more tech savvy than me. What are your thoughts on the intersection of technology and happiness? Do you have concerns, or do you think Kaczynski's maybe wrong and it actually helps us in our pursuit of happiness, like we talked about earlier?
yeah. So I will finish that book someday, but I've definitely
the manifesto,
read
Unabomber
some
manifesto.
portion and thumbed through others. That's how I read books. But yeah, this is really interesting because it's something that my dad had brought up many times growing up. That the idea, like, say that the satellite dish technology would go out or not work, and it would kind of make you upset if you couldn't watch what you
Had to
want.
smack the TV.
And he would make a point like, this stuff doesn't really make us happier, and I always thought, well, that seems really silly to me. I think it makes us happier. We get all this TV, but I definitely agree with him now.
Okay, so over the years, you've come full circle, come to
Yeah,
appreciate what Dad said.
yeah,
What's your
I
perspective
think
of that?
that too much technology is harming us, and
Okay, interesting.
with, just as an example, smartphones coming out and being everything, you basically have to have one.
That's what I'm
Almost.
worried about, like not being able to function in an
Well, and
everyday
I do
sense,
use my phone for
being compelled.
every facet of doing the business of my life, I think.
Even though you have some of these concerns, you're kind of compelled, would you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but also at one point a few years ago, I had to learn to just shut stuff off. So the more I shut off the phone and apps and
Come out to Colorado.
limit what I might use my phone for to maybe specific things, and I certainly waste time on it, and I think using it too much
And that's just one example. I
is
mean,
bad for kids and adults.
yeah, I mean well, you can relate to with the kids. Like I mean, for us at least, it's a constant battle. In terms of trying to limit the screens, and it's a constant battle because I don't want to harp on them too much, and I'm saying it literally multiple times every day. Do something besides screens, right? Let's do something else.
And you also want, I mean, they're going to have to learn to control or limit themselves
over time,
way, right? I mean, isn't that important for kids? So
maybe that's just a lesson we have to grow up and appreciate. I don't know.
Well, and how are we going to help them learn to do that? Because it's
so like your dad said when you were little, right? This technology doesn't make us happy.
Yeah.
Maybe just remind them that it's not the end all be all, right?
Right.
Not the answer to everything.
And I'll just state again that the more I shut things off my phone, or the less social media, and just generally shutting off all these notifications, they were driving me a little insane, I gotta say. Over time, I think they were interrupting my sleep, and so I just kind of block everything or take it off.
It becomes more and more constant. Like people that have watches that are beeping anytime they get an email. I mean, you're literally just getting constant.
There's 99.5% of the notifications that would like try to come through on my phone are meaningless.
Ultimately,
They
not
don't
worth your
mean,
time.
yeah.
Fair enough.
So they're all blocked and I never see them.
Nice. So it sounds like you obviously have some concerns then, and it's interesting. I don't know that I ever heard you say kind of how you uh, sort of grew to take that position over time. They become more like your dad in that respect. Uh, do you have any other like aspects of technology that you worry about, or is it mostly like just us being glued into our screens?
I don't know. I worry just broadly about society being too dependent on computer technology.
And what about like things
Uh,
being too easy too? Don't we need challenges? Like
yeah,
if machines start doing everything for us,
but I mean, so you hear on the one hand that there's so much potential that technology and computer technology can do for us, but are we using it the right way to, to actually improve our lives? I mean, is there a better way to
and
use
how
it
do
to
we know
actually
that
help?
too?
Yeah,
How do
how
we
would you
back up,
know?
right? We have our reservations, but obviously a lot of people think this technology is great and it does make them happy. People are
Yeah.
using them. I mean, on the other hand, some people admit that it's a problem for them and they have issues with it.
Well,
But
I benefit from technology in many ways
sure,
for things I need to learn or know
getting
or
up the
that I'm
mountain
interested.
roads to the
Yeah.
trailheads, right?
To health
Appreciate the car.
matters, to financial matters, to every,
It's a
what
difficult.
is going on, all these different things that are going on to live a life is facilitated by technology.
Sure, I mean, that's what fascinates me because, I mean, Kaczynski, like, how far over is he? I mean, and anytime we manipulate nature, that's kind of a technology, right? I
Right.
mean, we need some elements of technology, right?
Well, and that's how we
How do you
humans
navigate that?
live, right?
Right. And so I think you, me, Ted Kaczynski, we're all in agreement, maybe it sounds like that it's potentially harmful as is, right?
Yeah.
Granted, it could be helpful in some respects, and we need some technology, I would say. Again, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I'm not anti-technology, but it feels how I would describe kind of yucky
Yeah,
sometimes.
that's a good way to put it, I think. I can't spell out, and this is something I want to work on and really fine tune and
Yeah.
academically write on this is to what is that sort of you know ideal place in terms of technology. If you do
Well,
agree with Kaczynski, we need to backtrack. How do you even do that?
that's what I'd like the philosophers help with
Looking
to
for some
help
guidance.
people figure this out because uh,
We have some worries.
you read a lot about and learn about a lot of just dangers of technology or just various content that our kids might see and
It
uh,
is worrisome.
I think that
So the
it should be
philosophers are going to come to the
it should
rescue.
be a continuous like review of how we're using it maybe.
That's a good point. Yeah, but
I
maybe
mean,
at the
it's
very
not
least,
finished.
a greater, I don't know who would be in charge of this or how we
Well,
facilitate it, but some sort of oversight and at least think tanks and reflection more on this. Entertain Kaczynski a little bit more. Granted, his
yeah,
method was a little, not a little, but very questionable, right?
right.
Philosophically, does he have a point? And at least entertain it more, right?
Hmm.
Reflect on this more,
Yeah, I mean, I can see that he has a point other than the violence or
right?
other, things. So,
Yeah. Okay. So I wasn't quite sure where. I knew that you had some reservations. It sounds like you are definitely worried. All things considered, you like some elements of technology, but worried where it's going. It's yucky
y-
in
y-
general.
well, yeah, and if we're too dependent and just everybody looking at phones all the time, and
What's that
uh,
doing for us socially too?
exactly that's worrisome.
Okay.
So,
My second question, and we kind of got into this or alluded to it a little bit. So it's the artificial intelligence. Are you so this is a different issue than what we debated on the hike, right?
okay,
Slightly different. So
yeah.
are you worried about the proliferation of artificial intelligence? So whether or not they're going to ultimately be smarter than us and all
Hmm.
that, are in general, are you at all worried about where AI might go in the
Yeah,
proliferation?
I am. I think that there could be a lot of ways it could go, and yeah, I would have worries
You were
about
given a
it.
good example of, at the very least, sort of how things can spiral kind of out of control quickly. I
Right.
think I remember, and I was trying to think because I had heard something similar. I think it was with respect to like airports and how they um, sort of guide like the routes and the planes and so on. Like the
Hmm.
program screwed up and they had to like shut everything down for a while. I'm pretty sure that's the example I remember, but you were suggesting an example like that where it gets kind of scary when what was it? Do you remember the specific?
Well, I think in that case it was where a computer, not necessarily AI, had too much control over a physical water system. Was it
Okay,
that one?
yeah, I think that's the one I'm remembering.
Okay.
Yeah. So they
So
had
through
to.
a hack. So yeah, that wasn't really AI, I guess.
Okay,
Just
okay,
an example of,
fair
well, a
enough.
computer has a little too much control in this case.
Right, and yeah, how it at least presents a possible potential
A
huge issue.
vector for,
And the issue there
yeah.
was it contaminated then the water?
It was addressed in time
Okay, they showed it.
by, human intervention or
Okay,
something.
okay. So you are worried, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, you just hear about it every day. I've made the point over and over about how, like, in computer programming and computer security or network security, there's always a flaw. It's almost a given, and there's always a vulnerability. And security is in layers, but there's always some way,
To get,
and it's kind of about being more secure than the next guy.
and how do you ultimately know even that you are
And
secure
so
enough?
nothing is secure, and it makes me really disgruntled ultimately with technology.
Always feel a lack of security.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
I do.
Maybe
I
that's
mean,
something
obviously,
else as
yeah.
well.
I mean, we've gone. I mean, you know, my thoughts on that. I read Snowden's book and
Mm,
last year. Just yeah, this whole security and how tech is monitoring us, computer cameras everywhere, and
privacy and all of the data that's collected. So AI is actually used to mine and sift through this data. And like Amazon has, as I understand, the largest collection of consumer
info
data, info, purchase patterns in the
profiles on
world,
everyone.
or of any company in the world, and they do all kinds of things with that.
Make all kinds of money with that, probably. Yeah. Okay.
And maybe getting on a tangent there.
No, I like that. So I'm looking forward to this. This is the next segment. We're almost done. Don't worry. The Great Philosophical Abyss. So I have a series called The Great Philosophical Abyss, where I
Yeah.
actually sort of address topics that I'm interested in, give kind of a more detailed defense of my position. A lot of times it is I don't know, where you ended up on a lot of them. But so as I mentioned in that series, the name stems from I used to when I first started teaching would begin class by having this great philosophical abyss. It's a bunch of numbered sort of philosophical topics or questions or issues, and I'd have a student call out a number, and then I'd read that one out. Students would reflect on it, and we'd talk about it a little bit before we dove into the actual material. So similarly, what we're going to do then is I'm going to ask you 3 to 5. We'll see sort of how it goes here. Random questions from the abyss. So I need you to tell me a number between 1 and 76. I think maybe we'll do 3.
1 and 76.
Yeah, pick a number, any number between 1 and 76.
13.
13, the best number out there. Okay, well, this is interesting. Would you be willing to murder an innocent person if it would end hunger in the world? Again, would you be willing to murder an innocent person if it would end hunger in the world?
Uh, that's you hear that a lot of different ways. I don't think that I could probably murder an innocent person, so I guess I would have to say no. But on the other hand, I kind of think
It might be the right thing to do.
it might be.
Well, I bring this point up in my ethics classes where there might be situations, right, where you can concede the right thing to do is one thing,
Hmm.
but you couldn't possibly bring yourself to do that,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
yes, ideally someone
Can you
would
be
kill
held
the innocent.
responsible for that?
I mean, on the other hand, maybe, people that buy into this idea of negative responsibility, they're going to say if you have this opportunity, so utilitarians, for example, you always have to do whatever promotes the greatest happiness for the greatest number. If you have the opportunity to end world hunger and hence save a lot more lives by killing one, then you are responsible if you don't
Well, and
ensure
it goes
that.
back to the morals and stuff and what you're basing that on, least harm. And I mean, if you're starting there, there's a big argument to go ahead and
So
kill
even
somebody.
according to your,
but there's a great cost at doing that.
sure,
Um,
yeah, it would be tough, obviously, psychologically, right?
yes.
And yeah, I mean, it's a good thing. It's just in theory, right?
Right. Good thing.
So you're going
Yeah.
with no, ultimately. You think it would be proper, but you couldn't do it.
I can't trust that I could actually do it.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I mean, maybe if I think about this for a long time,
Come
but
back
I
for
don't
an
even know if
episode
I
two.
want to think about it more.
Not that one. Yeah. All right. Pick another one. 1 through 76.
Yeah. 33.
33. Oh boy. This is reminiscent of one of our friends. Would you eat a dead cricket for $10? If not, would you for any price name your price? Now this is actually pretty ironic because we have actually the last summer when we went out for hikes, the other guy that was with us when he was younger would occasionally, for certain amounts of money, do dares like this. So similarly, would you eat a dead cricket for $10? And if not, would you for any price?
Not for 10, and I would for a price.
Okay, what is it?
500.
500. Okay, fair enough. 500. It would take at least 500.
Yeah.
You were going to climb out on a ledge for 1,000 on our hike. We had this discussion, right? Just back and forth. There's a
Different
ledge sort of
states
hanging
of
out.
mind might.
And I was thinking an
different
army
results.
man crawl and peer over, and he's like, "I'm gonna go up. I would go up, hang my legs over for 1,000. For he needs 500 to eat a cricket though. And what was the other one that you needed more for? It was a hole, like a snake hole.
Yeah,
We weren't
that's
sure what was
Where did
down
we
there
end up on this
to stick his
sizable
hand in
hole?
there.
Where did we end up?
I thought you wanted more than what it would have been. It was way more than 1,000 than for the
And an
the
EMT
ledge.
crew
Oh yeah, and he insisted on having an EMT crew
denied. So
next to us. Okay, so $500 for the dead cricket. Would it matter if it was live?
no.
Okay. No discount for dead versus live or vice versa? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, last one.
Not this
You just have to pick a number. Did you hear that? Sorry. 1
well,
through
I thought you
76.
were sifting through.
No, you got to tell me the number.
Yeah. 59.
59. Oh boy. Is atheism justified? We kind of got somewhat into that. You think it is justified?
Yeah.
Atheism. So, no, I think we alluded to this soft versus hard atheism.
At least that's what makes the most sense. But yeah, if you want to talk
So
about
what do you,
the
well,
soft or
how about,
hard,
what do you take to atheism to mean?
I take it to mean as you are not convinced that there is like a God, whether in the traditional religious sense
see,
or
for me, I typically,
otherwise.
so that's what I refer to as soft atheism,
Okay.
right? It's what I would refer to as agnosticism, right? You're saying, I'm not going to commit to that. I don't have enough evidence, right, for a God.
Basically, I don't have good reasons.
Right. But you're not saying God does not exist.
Right.
That's hard atheism.
Right.
And so traditionally, or if you're just referring to atheism, I would typically associate it with hard atheism, right? And I would use agnosticism for the person who suggests, I'm not sure, right?
Yeah, I feel like I've heard this different ways.
Okay, fair enough. So that's why I define our terms.
Yeah,
define our terms.
Yeah.
Your position is, it sounds like what I would call agnosticism, where
Yeah,
I can't say definitively God exists, but you don't want to necessarily say God doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
In which case,
I mean, a lot of things just seem silly depending on how far you want to go, but
what if I pushed you? I don't know that I did.
okay.
If you have to go, let's say, so why is there something and not nothing? And there's those two basic possibilities. Stuff's just existed forever.
Yeah.
Or we had divine spark at the beginning. If you
or not divine, but it just started. Was
Okay,
that
well,
also
I mean, I would call that divine or
okay?
God or something
Yeah.
unexplainable, not normally
Okay.
physical.
Yeah.
So if we refer to that as God,
Okay.
um, and you had to lean one way or another, granted, your ultimate position is I don't know.
Hmm.
You have one way or another you're leaning.
Uh,
It sounded like you kind of said earlier the naturalist sort of way.
well, yeah. I mean, you really got me thinking when you mentioned this a while back. How you were calling that God now. So
Yes, check out. I'll
yes.
have to
So
link the video of
yeah. I
that
mean,
where
I
I
know it all comes down to just really what you want to mean with that word.
right. That's where it's important to,
So
and I talk about this
and
in logic. Define
yeah,
your terms,
and
right?
I know what you mean, and I think we already kind of covered it.
Right. And so by defining our terms, we ended up. I mean, regardless of what you want to call it, atheist or agnosticism,
Hmm.
your positions. I don't know definitively one way or another. Did you say which
Which,
way you would lean
which
though?
way I would lean is uh,
Don't you can't lean one way or
I
another?
really can't.
Okay.
I don't have enough
Perfect
information to
50-50.
even lean. Just I have this taste of traditional God for um, this causing the spark or the spark that caused it because that seems as made up as a lot of other stories almost. So, but there's not really the alternative is I don't know
Okay.
kind of
Or
thing.
there's no better alternative, maybe? I don't
Right.
know. What are
Yeah.
the and maybe I mean I always sort of suggest there's these two basic options and maybe there's just other ones I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, I
I don't
have
know.
considered that there's other
If
options
you
that
get
we
to
don't
them, let me
know
know.
about, but I don't know
Right.
them.
I'll consider any other options.
Sure. Me
Uh
too.
all right, yeah, I think you survived the great philosophical test.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. You came out unscathed, I'd say. So we're wrapping up here. This one will be quick. This segment is called Three Wishes from the Socratic Genie. So Socrates, who's going to come down or up or wherever he's all around, I don't know.
Okay.
And he's going to grant any three wishes you have, whether it be philosophical, philosophy related or not. Any three things you want, go.
Uh,
No pressure.
fine. $10 million,
So you are all about money.
an RV, and in a mansion.
In a mansion. Okay. You could have just upped the money, I think.
Could have, but you put me on the spot.
Okay, fair enough. So we have 10 million, 10 million, sorry, I
Hmm.
didn't mean to squeeze you there. 10 million, an RV, and a mansion.
Yep, and I don't want infinite wishes. It's just too much.
All right,
So,
my kids would say, right, your first wish would be
yeah, I
infinite
don't want
wishes.
that. So
So I didn't hear any answer to the meaning of life, why we're here, why there's something and then nothing.
you didn't hear any answer.
I didn't hear that as one of your wishes, having the answers to those questions or
Oh,
answers.
right. Because it seems
I
too
think it
cheap.
might be one of mine if I had to pick.
Really?
Just
I mean,
saying, I
that
don't know.
seems
Too cheap.
at the first on first consideration, I can't. I mean,
It
that
needs to be
crossed my
bigger or
mind.
what? Is
It
there
just
anything
seems too
bigger?
dangerous to know,
Yeah,
almost.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, do we
Maybe.
actually want to know these
Right.
answers?
Or
That's a good
can we
point.
even know? Like, is
Well, yeah, theoretically you could, would you though? Would you want that
okay.
to be answered?
Yeah.
But I think you raised a good point, right? I don't know that we necessarily would want to know
Right. Like,
some of these answers, so
we're
maybe we're
not.
better off not having the answers. Okay, so the last segment before we'll conclude then is, did you have anything philosophy related you wanted to ask me, especially since you've known me for so long? You probably know most of my positions on almost anything, but is there anything over the years that you're like, oh, I wonder what? You know,
Yeah. So, being philosophical and always kind of logical minded.
try to be, yeah,
Right.
as we always
Do
do,
you
all
get
of us, right?
annoyed with like the kind of the I don't know all of these strange thoughts of the non-academic philosophers out here? I mean, we don't know what we're talking about half the time.
No, I mean, I've got a greater appreciation over the years that for all experiences mattering, and that again, who's to say that those in academia are any more special than I don't know anyone else? And are you talking about like particularly when they try to take positions in philosophy when they're maybe not as well versed. And
Yes, because surely I have.
yeah,
So.
that happens in all walks of life, though, right?
Hmm.
People have these political views that I think are
Hmm.
just, you know, unthinking, or they didn't really think them through, right? I mean, so
Hmm.
whether it's philosophical or not, and it does bother me, and I would say it's just not being very analytical. I mean, almost thinking through your answers and your positions on things, that kind of is in some sense what I would say philosophy is, like thinking through and analyzing stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. It does bug me when we take positions, or people, whether it's philosophy or not, take positions and they don't really seem to assess or think them through. Sure, but that probably bothers everyone, right?
Sure, it can be bothersome, but also really healthy.
Sure, yeah. To hear, right?
Yeah,
Even the ones that are wrong, or at least you think are wrong,
yeah.
right? To hear
I mean,
the
how many things that you've challenged me on, and that I had to think about for a long time.
well, yeah, and then how many times? I mean, you can think you know every nuanced aspect of something,
Hmm.
but I'm always like, oh, I'll concede when I haven't really thought about that, or in that way, and
Right.
so that happens all the time.
Okay.
So I try to keep that in mind too, and never be too firm, and so if a bunch of people are saying different things than me, maybe that's an indication that there's something wrong with what I'm doing or thinking, right? And maybe
Right.
entertain their other perspectives more. I don't know. So
Okay.
yeah, it is useful to like, I forgot how you put it, but to hear all these other perspectives, even if you think they're wrong.
Hmm.
So
Right. Okay.
anything else?
Yeah. So
Oh, did you have this? Like, how did you know this was coming?
I
Did you?
didn't
Okay,
have.
man. It's like you had this all lined up.
I know. I am just lucky that I'm remembering them. 'Cause I forgot.
You have my
Have
memory.
you asked more questions than you've answered with philosophy, or
Let me respond with the question. What do
yeah.
you think? Yes,
Yes.
you end up with more questions. I think in some sense that's this idea of Socratic wisdom, the greater appreciation of what you don't know, and that's
Mm.
intelligence or wisdom in that, at least that sense, and that's always I've been drawn to that. In philosophy, maybe it wakes you up to the notion that you don't have the answers, and you raise more questions as a
So
result.
then follow up. Has it ever bothered you? I mean, in any degree, or that you might not know,
That
or
I can't. I think you had mentioned this earlier that you gotta kind of grow to accept it. Uh, I don't know. It's really tough for me because I am so philosophical. I can't help but question these things all the time. And again, it's difficult for me even socially because it's hard to find people that I can share that with and really get it out.
Mhm.
I don't know. So, what was the original question? There's my memory. You
Did
forgot too.
did you have you asked more questions
Oh
than
yeah,
you've
yeah. So
answered yet?
definitely,
Okay.
definitely. But again, I think that's probably a sign of, or at least in my opinion, of actual philosophical growth because you're recognizing through questioning that you don't have all these answers, or and a lot of times what you thought was the case isn't the case, and so on. So
Yeah. Okay. So for the last one, probably the biggest thing about philosophy as the average Joe that I came away with
the average Jamie.
is that I don't know, right? And I don't
Is that what
know.
the average everyday Jamie thinks, or average
No,
everyday Joe
I'm
thinks?
not necessarily saying that.
Okay,
I just
sorry.
think you asked how my philosophical views might have changed, and it's in a lot of ways it's more towards I don't know, and it's an easier way to live if you can kind of
Accept that.
embrace that because it might be closer to the truth. So
You don't have
things
to spend as
might be
much time defending
easier
it
in life,
positions
right?
either.
Right.
So
Or feel the need to take strong sides if you don't know. And so that was kind of like one of my biggest takeaways from philosophy. But for the average
getting to
Joe,
that complete
what
not
as a
knowing.
philosopher, what would be like? Is that a good takeaway, or what is a takeaway you would recommend that we're not all going to be academics, but there's good things from philosophy? Do you think like
Well,
everyone could have some benefit,
sure. I mean,
or
again,
what do you
I
think?
actually think it's a mark of intelligence or wisdom. Again, this idea of Socratic wisdom, when you go kind of grow and maybe become more agnostic about things, it's showing that you're actually are questioning things, or you're not being so rigid and so on. So, I mean, and all the byproduct of that is that you're going to be much more accepting of others as well. You're not going to be as rigid in your thinking. You're going to be more flexible, and open to other possibilities. I mean, versus if you stay firm and you don't entertain the more agnostic positions, and then you're going to be less easy to get along with in general, I would say. So it might seem hopeless, like, oh, I end up with more questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more, I don't know, but in the end, maybe we're better off because we're easier to work with, and we don't have to spend so much time trying to defend things we don't really believe. I think that's actually the case a lot of times.
That's a good,
Yeah, so
good point.
I think a lot of us spend a lot of our lives maturing is just figuring out and being confident enough to just embrace what we really think and not maybe say what others expect us to say and think.
Yeah.
Anyway, so philosophy helps with that, I think, because you are exposed to all the alternative views and not just the ones you grew up with. So, is that all you got for me? You got three good ones.
That was
Yeah.
3.
All right. So I think that's it. We'll go ahead and conclude unless you have something else.
This was really fun.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it was great too. I really appreciate you coming on. A great first episode. Would that be a pilot episode? I guess. First episode, whatever you want to call it. Got to know you pretty well.
Yeah, I really got to know you too. I really appreciate
the
opportunity.
So I know it was a little bit of nerves, didn't go too bad, right?
Sure, definitely was thinking I'd be nervous.
And I really do appreciate you coming on because, again, this stuff's not that easy to talk about. And if you are at all, it's not something we're comfortable with a lot of times. So
well, I just kind of gave up on thinking about the computer and trying to talk as I might normally with you. So
that's a good strategy. I think it did help, yeah. So, all right, well, thanks for tuning in. Again, this is the Philosopher's Couch. This was episode 1, and we had Jamie Kramer on the episode. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on episode 2. Thanks.